thank you all so much for joining us, and apologies to the genuine hordes outside who we had to turn away. And thank you very much, Robert, for joining us.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
Yeah, to start this CPS programme, I am...
You've got some good reading material here.
Yeah, well...
I approve of this report in particular.
and also the Conservative Revolution Centre for Policy Studies at 50, which is on sale outside, and it's the only thing in this entire building which is not being given away for free.
Yeah, I made a joke earlier that the freebies are so good at this conference, it's only a matter of time before Keir Starmer arrives.
Yeah, well, the Tom Tugendhat brand Freak Tan might not be. So let's start. I mean, just the most basic question of all to start with. And I should just say we will have questions from the audience about halfway through. So please start thinking. But like, why you? Biggest defeat in 100 years. Party on the floor, and obviously encouraged by what's happened to Labour. But we're in a brutally awful position. Why you to turn it around?
Well, look, I think when a party suffers a defeat like the one we've just suffered, which, as you say, was the worst in our whole history. It's the worst, well, there's a dispute over this. I said it was the worst since 1832, when I did an event with Jacob Rees-Mogg, and he said it was the worst since the 1760s. And somebody heckles he was probably there in 1760. But either way, on a serious note, when a party suffers a defeat like we've just suffered, I think you have a choice. One way is the easy path, where you put your fingers in your ears, you pretend that nothing went wrong, you hope the electorate have buyer's remorse and come back to you. And look, this is a bad government. It's had a bad 3 months. So it's tempting to go down that path. That is not my way. The harder path is one where you do the most difficult thing of all in politics, which to accept that perhaps you didn't get everything wrong. Right. And to say that on some of the most important issues facing our country, our borders, the economy, and our public services, we failed to deliver. I think if you listen to the public, you accept that we got things wrong, and you bring forward serious answers to those challenges, then you can begin to bring the public back. And that's what I offer. I have a plan. I have thought about what we need to do as a party and a country. I don't want to waste 5 years. You know, should we leave the ECHR? Shouldn't we leave the ECHR? I have a very firm view as to where this country needs to go. Let's use this leadership contest. Let's use this conference as a crucible of debate and take a position and then take the party forwards. That's what I want to do. I think if we do that, then we can win. We can take the fight to Keir Starmer and we can win the next election. Change to win. That's what I offer.
So you're in the papers today, Daily Express, for example, Sunday Express even, talking about not needing to forget the Red Wall. And this is a crucial question. We had, the Conservatives lost voters to the left, they lost voters to the right, Lib Dems, Labour, Reform did not vote. You name it. Some people are saying the Johnson coalition, the 2019 coalition, that doesn't work anymore. That even if either it only worked because of Boris, it only worked because of Brexit, it only worked because of Corbyn, or it could have worked, but we've screwed things up. That could have been a stronger phrase. Too badly. But you're saying that you think. You're saying you disagree with that. That it's not that we need to go back to being Cameronite. It's not that we need to find a new coalition. You think that the fundamentals are still sound.
I do. No, I suppose I come to this from my own personal background. I grew up just down the road from here in Wolverhampton. I represent a small market town in North Nottinghamshire. I am unashamedly provincial. Somebody said to me, gave a quote to Laura Koonsberg saying that I was from the Midlands, as if that was sort of disparaging. I'm proud to be from the Midlands. I barely went to London as a child. The world of Westminster seemed a million miles away from me. To me, although I've been lucky in life to go to university, to have a career, ultimately to end up in Parliament and the Cabinet, my world is the world of small towns and small cities. The Conservative Party is at its best when it is the trade union for working people in this country. And so just like Boris, I believe that we need to represent the whole country. And that is a very long-standing tradition in our party. Disraeli spoke of one nation. Boris spoke of levelling up. Both were right. We've got to ensure that we are providing opportunity to a young boy growing up in Wolverhampton just as much as someone growing up in central London. That's what I want the Conservative Party to do. I felt that very strongly before the election. I feel it even more strongly now, because having spent day after day on the streets of my constituency, I came to a firmer view than ever that who are our people? Our people are the white van men, they're the sole traders, there's the small business people, the people who are getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, trying to put food on the table for their families. Those are Conservatives. Those are the people we should be doing everything we can to support. And that does mean, whether we call it levelling up or something else, returning to that agenda as how we spread opportunity, how we make sure everyone in this country can grow up with opportunities. That's what I want us to do. That's where I want the party to return to. And I believe if we do that, we can win back all of those seats that we lost at the election. Then we can win in Mansfield and Redcar and Bury. These places should not just be seen as Labour. These are Conservative-minded places. These are places where there are small c Conservatives, our people. We just need to be more Conservative and do the things that those people are asking us to do. Help them onto the housing ladder, secure their borders, be tough on crime, have a more realistic approach to net zero so we have cheap and reliable energy, back sole traders and small business people. That's my agenda.
So you mentioned housing there, and I'm not going to talk that much about immigration because you have literally written page after page after page of it, and I've edited that, and we know very well what you think on that, and it's a very good report, and you should all read it. But your big before immigration, the big issue you were associated with was housing, and you were, I think, shafted, if not too far from it, by Boris Johnson, who told you go out there, think the unthinkable, reform the system, build the houses this country needs, and then when your colleagues said no, we don't want anyone to build the houses the country needs, Boris probably stood on stage and said no housing on any greenfields ever. Honestly, zoning reform I never met her. How do you, as someone who I know believes in this, how do you battle with that NIMBYist tendency within your own party on these issues? Because that is surely one of the great dangers for the party now, is that now that we are shrunk to our core vote, we do the things that our core vote likes.
Yeah, look, I was proud of my record as Housing Secretary, and we got new homes being built in this country to the highest level since 1987, and it fell back very sharply after that. And I think the decision not to proceed, or not to proceed in full with those reforms, was probably the biggest public policy mistake of the last Parliament. I think Boris himself would probably accept that it cost people their jobs, it cost us GDP, and more importantly, or most importantly, it cost us homes that young people desperately need in this country. I want this party to be the party of home ownership again. It pains me to see Angela Rayner, trying to take the mantle of home ownership from the Conservative Party, the party of Harold Macmillan and Margaret Thatcher. Never again. We have to be the party of home ownership. Now, we obviously got to do that in a way which is sensitive, because we also, as a party, believe in conserving what we've inherited from the past, like our wonderful landscape and environment, beautiful market towns and suburbs. So my answer today, with the benefit of reflection from that period, is that we should return to bold supply-side reforms. We should focus those on our urban areas. And if we were lucky enough to be in government again, do zonal planning in our cities, and set out to do the most ambitious programme of urban densification and regeneration in our country's modern history. I think if we can do that, we can build thousands more homes, we can create wealth and jobs, and we can get lots of people onto the housing ladder and make them Conservative again. So that would be a big part of my agenda, if I'm lucky enough to lead the party. And if we need sort of succour in that, look at what's happening in Canada. Just before the election was called, I went to see the Canadian Conservatives, and I met their housing, or shadow housing minister. I met Pierre Poilievre, the Canadian Conservative leader, and they are winning with young people, with 20-somethings, 30-somethings, 40-somethings, against super woke Justin Trudeau. And they are doing that, at least in part, because one of their core messages is building homes. So I say, in fact, we campaign on very similar things. Secure borders, tough on crime, realistic approach to net zero, build homes. That's what I want the party to stand for.
So isn't there, I mean, this isn't a challenge to you particularly, it's a challenge to the entire party, but you're talking about high growth, low taxes, small state, all the things that obviously the Centre for Policy Studies believes in. But at the same time, the Office of Budget Responsibility has just put out a report saying that over the next 50 years, the share of tax revenue taken by the state will climb from 40% to 60%. The share of GDP taken by the NHS will double. And there are, frankly, the choices facing our country are more taxes, more borrowing, less spending, higher growth. And no one is being remotely honest about those choices. Neither party was honest about those choices at the election. How do you square the circle? I mean, how do you create an electable, something that the voters will accept, which is also fiscally realistic?
Well, I think there's two components to that. One is, how do you create a small state that actually works rather than the current big state that fails? And the second part is, how do you actually get growth going again in our economy? If I take the second question first, I have a very clear view as to how we in the Conservative Party, and if we were in government, could try to get this economy growing faster. Not just than it has in recent years, but how it has since at least the financial crisis. And that does mean being much more radical. It means having a different energy policy to the one we have today, where we set out to deliver cheap and reliable energy. That means investing in new nuclear. It means saying that gas is here to stay.
I'm not sure anyone's ever described nuclear as cheap.
Well, it's cheaper than some forms of offshore wind right now. So that's what I would do. I would set out to have cheap and reliable energy in this country. I'd have a different approach to education than we have today, where we take money from failing universities and allow bad universities to close and move that money into technical vocational education, good apprenticeships. I would do welfare reform, where I'm convinced there are billions of pounds to be saved if we help people off welfare into the dignity of work, just like Ian Duncan Smith did in the early days of the coalition, but that's slipped in recent years. And I would get the country building again. Not just homes, incidentally, but everything. You can't build a data centre, a laboratory, a road, a railway. We spent £300 million on the planning stage for the Lower Thames crossing in our 14 years in office, and we didn't put a shovel in the ground. That's got to end. So there are ways in which we can get our economy growing faster, but they require a more radical approach than the one we've seen recently. On the state, look, I think we've just got to be much better than we have in recent years at driving value for money for the taxpayer. We've been so obsessed with inputs and had so little attention to outputs. We've boasted about how much money we're putting into the NHS, but not what is the productivity of the NHS. We treated this service as a religion to be worshipped, not as a public service to be reformed. So I think that we have to be more conservative when we're next in office, by which I mean we have to be reformers. And I think one strand you can see through all of the ministerial jobs that I've done, sometimes it's suited my political career well, sometimes it's come at a cost to me, is I've always been a reformer. I tried to reform the housing system. I tried to cut red tape for small businesses. I tried to do things post-Brexit in the Treasury, like free ports. And obviously at the Home Office, I fought relentlessly to fundamentally change our immigration system. Conservatives are at their best when they're reformers. That's what I want the next Conservative government to be.
Sure, but on the NHS in particular, it is a religion to people. And if you ask voters, even Conservative voters, what their concerns were at the last election, NHS was absolutely right up there. In fact, we have some opinion polling coming out in the next few weeks showing that people essentially refused to accept that we could have tax cuts because they thought that would take money from the NHS, and the NHS was in such a bad condition. How do you win back trust for the Conservatives on that issue, which has always been a kind of point of neuralgia for us? I mean, David Cameron had to stand there and say, my entire political programme is 3 letters, NHS. And then, but now here we are back at the start of that process.
Well, I agree with the approach that David Cameron took in the sense that, exactly as you say, the country cares passionately about the NHS. And it doesn't matter whether you're a Labour voter, Lib Dem voter, Reform voter, Conservative voter, the 3 biggest issues that everyone says, in different orders, are immigration, the economy, and the NHS. So we have to be obsessed with how we can reform the NHS and make it work for the public. That's why I have been talking about it. I think I'm almost the only candidate that's been talking about it in this leadership election, trying to set out practical ways in which we can do that. That's why a few weeks ago I said that if Wes Streeting were to come forward with genuine reforms to the NHS that were in the national interest, that would improve productivity, I would support him. Because I think the public would view us as a mature opposition if we were doing that. Now, I'm obviously very sceptical of that, because the revealed preference of this government so far has been to bow to vested interests and the trade unions. But I think we should aim to do that. I think we should have a degree of humility. We should accept that we've put a lot of money in, but that we haven't delivered the improvements in the service that were required. And we should use this time in opposition wisely to come up with serious solutions to that. That will be about embracing new technology and personalised medicines. It will be, how do you change some of the structural flaws in the system? How do you make better use of the private sector? We know, I think, some of those things. We've shirked those difficult decisions because we were too fearful of being mischaracterised by our opponents. Let's use this enforced period in opposition to come forward with credible solutions.
So that was something else I was going to ask you slightly later, actually. Are there areas, I was thinking of social care, but NHS is another example, where you would think there is potential to collaborate with Labour or to offer support to Keir Starmer? I used the example in a Sunday Times column of Robert Peel, whose policy towards the new Liberal government was actually to agree with all of their good ideas and rehabilitate the Conservative Party that way. Is that something that attracts you, or do you think we just need to tear into these awful, useless socialist monsters?
Well, look, I think we'll have plenty of fodder to tear into these awful socialist individuals. We've seen that already. But look, my approach to opposition would be, let's be the serious party. The public are yearning for politicians who tackle the big questions facing this country. Set out the trade-offs, be honest about those, and have serious solutions. Now, there will be occasions where we do agree with Labour. I mean, I would be willing to support Labour on housing, for example, but I'm actually very disappointed by what they've done. They've done the opposite of what I would have done. They slashed the housing targets in our big cities to spare the blushes of Sadiq Khan and Andy Burnham and these failing Labour mayors, and they've hiked them in the countryside where there isn't the infrastructure, it's not environmentally sustainable. You know, they've done a 1,000% increase in housing targets in Redcar, where, you know, I'd love to get more homes built in Redcar, but 1,000% increase there whilst decreasing it in London, you know, that's absurd. So I'm disappointed by what they're doing there. On the NHS, look, the jury's out. But if Wes Streeting did come forward with serious reforms, I'd be minded to support them. There'll be plenty of things on which we can sock it to Keir Starmer. You can see that by scrapping the Rwanda policy, by letting out thousands of dangerous criminals, you know, by punishing 10 million pensioners in order to give £10,000 to well-paid train drivers without even settling the strikes. It's clear what the battleground is. If there are serious things that they're doing in the national interest, I would support them.
But, I mean, on that last point, I mean, I can understand politically why you would say, oh, they're taking money from pensioners. But the fact is, surely, I mean, the Centre for Policy Studies, the people like the winter fuel payment, it means tested, is completely rational. We are giving free money to some of the richest people in the country, some of the richest people who have ever been in the country, and yet.
Well, just be aware of that, saying that, Rob, because you know a pension, an 80-year-old pensioner on £13,000 a year is going to be £600 worse off this autumn in terms of energy support. I think that is shameful, don't you? Yeah. I mean, that person is not on a lot of money. How would you and I survive on £13,000? You know, that's tough. We should be looking after people like that. And the point here is about the choice. You can learn a lot about someone's politics from what are they choosing to fund and how are they paying for it. Keir Starmer is choosing to give £8 billion to a fantasy energy company run by Ed Miliband, which doesn't even produce any energy, and he's taking that away from 10 million pensioners. I think we have to call him out for that, because I think that is shameful.
But another issue on this, which has come up today, is maternity pay and regulation on small businesses. You've seen Kemi Badenoch's remarks, I imagine. I mean, what's your take on it? Is Does the government interfere too much with small businesses? Is maternity pay should it be pulled back?
Well, I don't agree with Kemi on this one. I'm a father of 3 young daughters. I want to see them get the support that they need when they enter the workplace. Our maternity pay is amongst the lowest in the OECD. I think the Conservative Party should be firmly on the side of parents and of working mums who are trying to get on. I know how difficult that is. We should be supporting them, not making their lives more difficult.
Even if it involves increasing burdens on small businesses?
Well, our maternity pay is already amongst the lowest of anyone in the OECD. I mean, if you talk to parents, as you and I do all the time, no one says it's easy taking time off work, having maternity leave, having kids. Why would we want to make it harder for them? That's not what I want to do. There are plenty of other ways in which we can help small businesses to prosper rather than targeting maternity pay. I mean, some of the things that I've done as a minister. During COVID, I did probably the biggest set of deregulatory steps to support small businesses for decades. I converted every pub and restaurant in the country into a takeaway overnight. I allow people to do alfresco dining in our town centres and high streets, which created one of the best summers in the modern history of this country. There are things that ministers can do which are small, simple, help small businesses. We should be focused on those, not on things which make life harder for working people and parents.
And something else that's been in the news is tuition fees. Labour are saying they increase them. I mean, you already touched on you have a slightly different view of university policy, but would you support an inflation-linked increase in tuition fees?
No, I don't think so. Look, what I want to do is something quite radical on universities. I think the sector is bloated. I want to see us move funding from universities which are underperforming, even if that means that those universities have to change, and devote that to apprenticeships and to good quality vocational and technical education. I think that is so much better. And there are universities in our country which are not serving their local people. I want to make sure those universities are back in the service of their local and regional economies. And if that meant that some poor performing universities had to transform, for example, into apprenticeship hubs, absolutely. That seems entirely logical to me. If we're lucky enough to be in office again in the future, let's do for our universities what we did for our primary and secondary schools. Transform them, enable the good ones to prosper and the bad ones to fail, and good people to come in and run them in the future.
And I mean, we're going to have quite a lot of questions, so I'll throw it over to people before. But we talk mostly about policy. I mean, we're a think tank. That's what we do. But one of the big issues that you highlight in your campaign is the members and the membership and the state of the party. This is something you're not alone in this. I mean, everyone's how do you fix this? I mean, a point I've made is I've been involved in Conservative politics for quite a long time. No one has ever asked me to join the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party is the worst organisation at marketing itself of any organisation. Thank you all for coming, but but you are not normal people. If I can put it like that. But how do you reconnect you? And your parliamentary colleagues will tell stories of being on the stump and hearing people say, and you say, how are you voting? They say, obviously I'm a doctor, so obviously I'm a teacher, so obviously I'm a civil servant, so how do you rebuild and reconnect the Conservative Party with the country?
Yeah, well, very good question. Look, I think the party needs fundamental change. I mean, it's not just cosmetic change. It needs fundamental rebuilding. I think it begins with a different attitude. The party has disrespected its members for a very long time. It's viewed them as a cash cow. You get sent an email asking for money. You're never asked what your views are. It doesn't take itself seriously in some ways. I mean, take as a case in point, this leadership contest. The CCHQ wanted we leadership contenders to deliver 10-minute speeches. That was it. When you're applying for the most serious job, to be leader of our party and a potential future Prime Minister of our country, that was disrespectful to the membership. I said no. It's now 20 minutes. I still think that's not enough. You should be able to walk on stage and deliver a 30-minute speech if you want to be Prime Minister of this country. So the party has consistently disrespected its members. My attitude would be treat the members as your friends, your colleagues, your equals, return the party to the service of the membership. And that's how, alongside actually standing for something again, because that's how people come in. If they believe in this party, they think they have a sense of mission. If you can do that, I think we will get people back into the party. I want to get young people back into the party above all else, because we can't survive as a party if we don't appeal to young people. You know, we've talked about that. It's about home ownership. It's about the way we present ourselves. We're having good social media. It's not hard to do. Our social media is 10 years out of date as a party. Look on my Twitter account. You see videos that are viewed millions of times, reaching over the heads of the left-leaning media, you know, into people's living rooms, onto their phones, selling conservatism itself to a new generation. I think we can do that. But it does mean a very different attitude that the party needs to take to its membership. Lastly, and this is emblematic of it, think of how we've selected candidates recently. You know, the days of the leader of the party parachuting in their favoured son or daughter, the special advisor, the press officer, into what was perceived to be a safe Conservative seat. That was immensely disrespectful. It was disrespectful for all of you. It was disrespectful to anyone who aspires to be a Conservative candidate and Member of Parliament. You have my solemn promise that will never happen if I'm lucky enough to lead this party. You should be in the driving seat. You should choose who your parliamentary candidates are. That's how we inspire people of substance to stand as parliamentary candidates once again.
Well, okay, I'm going to open up for questions, but I wanted to ask one more first, which has been bugging me, which is there was a clip of you running across a bridge in London on your morning jog with a T-shirt saying Hamas are terrorists. Now, Hamas are terrorists. I think we're all happy to say that.
Well, Kate Burley wasn't.
But it didn't strike me as, if you were trying to appeal to the median voter, that the most relatable thing to be doing. That, so, you know, I don't go out for my morning jog with a T-shirt saying vote Conservative or, you know, or vote Trump. You know, I mean, is there a danger that your campaign has been, indeed, like, you know, even saying that you're going to, you would vote for Donald Trump? Is there a danger? There is a danger that you are playing to the crowd here at the expense of the country as a whole?
Well, I think I did make a mistake wearing that hoodie saying that Hamas are terrorists. I should have said Hamas and Hezbollah are terrorists. But look, I'm not going to apologise, Rob, for saying what is evidently true. And if, you know, as Kay Burley said, it incited people, it incited Hamas supporters, who are also terrorists. Look, I don't care about that. But if you ask me like my campaign, well, I would argue that this has been the most energetic campaign of this leadership contest. We've done more events, we've met more people, our social media has been viewed by more than anybody else, and that's what you need from a leader. You know, you need someone who's going to work hard, sell the Conservative message, enthuse people, make them go to vote for our party. That's what I've set out to prove, and this is a long road, but so far that's doing well.
Fair enough. Well, I would ask you about weight loss tips, because that's definitely something I need to
go running. Well, we could go running together.
I think that, yes, that would be a shameful exhibition.
What hoodie would you wear?
For one of us. I'm not even sure I've got any hoodies. But yes, any questions? If you, the gentleman here and then.
Hi, Mr. Jenrick. Thank you very much for that. I'm a little worried. I'm a bit concerned because we are in one of the biggest financial crises that we've had for a very long time. And what I'm hearing from you is reinstating the old people's fuel allowances, eat out to help out, more burdens on companies for maternity pay, subsidies for universities to continue for what are underpriced degrees at the moment. All of these are very worthy things. I'm sure everybody in the room will agree, and it's very easy for us to agree with all of these sentiments. But fundamentally, what we want to see is that you've got the strength to take the really tough decisions. Where are the savings going to be?
Well, you may have misheard me, so I didn't say a lot of those things, actually. I didn't say eat out to help out. That was Rishi Sunak's policy. My policy.
You did say it was a lovely,
my
lovely
policy
summer as
was
a result.
deregulating our pubs and restaurants so that they could go and put tables and chairs outside them, and millions of young people went and had a great summer spending money and supporting those businesses. That was a conservative approach to how we handled the aftermath of lockdown. I didn't say that I supported spending more money on universities. I said the opposite. I think we should spend more money on apprenticeships. And I want to get money off our underperforming universities. I might even let them go under and spend money on apprenticeship hubs and good quality technical and vocational education. If you ask me, have I got the strength to do proper supply side reforms? Ask yourself, who in the last 5 years tried to do proper supply side reforms? I would struggle to name anyone in the last cabinet who did proper supply side reforms other than perhaps Mel Stride, who worked hard to get our welfare system into a better state, and the work that I did to deregulate small businesses, to transform the planning system, and to fundamentally change our immigration system. Now, some of those were hard things to do. Some were very popular with members of the party. Some were not very popular with members of the party. But I think what people know I will stand for is taking difficult decisions and doing what I think is right in the national interest to grow our economy and to put us in a better place as a country. That's what I would like to do if I'm lucky enough to lead the party forwards.
Yeah, well, the lady in the front row, and then we'll go.
Thanks so much, Robert and Robert. In terms of the immigration debate, do you think that's the debate of the last election and not the one that's going to happen in the next 5 years?
No, absolutely not. Look, I think, unfortunately, it's just the case that we live in an age of mass migration. There are millions of people on the move. And whether it's legal or illegal migration, this is going to be the biggest issue, not just in British politics, but in European politics and the politics of most Western countries for the rest of our lifetimes. So a party of the centre-right, like ours, has to have an answer. In fact, if we don't have answers to it, there is no future for our party. If we are lucky enough to get back into power, we will not be given a third chance on these issues. No way. So we have to have serious answers. I know where I stand on these issues. On legal migration, we should have a cap set by Parliament in the tens of thousands or lower. And why is a cap important? Because we didn't have a cap previously. You know, some people say, oh, we had a cap before. We've never had a cap. The cap is our democratic lock, so that I, as a politician, can look you in the eye and say, this is going to happen this time. And the cycle of broken promises will end once and for all. And on illegal migration, we have to do what I urged the government to do at the turn of the year, ultimately chose to resign when the government didn't do it, is to detain and deport people within days, not months or years as it is right now. And the only way in which you can do that is by leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. It is not possible to do it otherwise. Can't be reformed. That requires unanimity of 46 countries. That is a fantasy. So there's a very simple choice on that issue. Leave or remain. I'm for leave. If you remain, you consign this country to years, decades of terrorists on our streets, foreign national offenders we can't remove, illegal migration, and laws being made in Strasbourg that none of us have voted for. I'm not prepared to do that. So this leadership election is a choice. Leave or remain.
Hi, thanks. Robert, a media question from the Guardian. A lot of the stuff that you say is aimed at what you say are red wall voters, and particularly ones who seem to have been tempted towards reform at the last election. But you lost 5 seats to reform, you lost about 60 to the Lib Dems, and a lot of people, small c Conservatives, who moved away from your party towards the Lib Dems, did so because they didn't like what some of them called the nasty party stuff. Do you think those people have just gone and will never come back, or do you think your policies would tempt them back? And if so, what will they be tempted by?
Well, I don't agree with the analysis that some say, that this is a simple choice between trying to bring back the votes we lost on our right and those we lost on our left. I want to do both, and I think that's possible. And to the point that Rob mentioned earlier about the issues that the public care about, the public, however you slice them, care about the economy, immigration, and the NHS, including Lib Dem voters. So we have to have serious answers on all three of those issues. That's what my whole campaign is about. The very first article I wrote, literally in the hours where I hadn't slept after polling day, said that those are the three things we failed to deliver on. Those are the three things we need to find answers to if we're going to rebuild trust and confidence. That was true then, it's true now. I do think that you have to seek to find subtlety in your language when you approach issues like immigration, extremism, crime, issues that I campaign on. And you have to always try to persuade people rather than needlessly provoke them. And find language that works as well in North Nottinghamshire, where I represent, where people are quite robust, as it might in some other parts of the country. And that is certainly what I try to do. I think we can do that, and we can win back people on all sides of the divide. I don't agree with this view that some say that all we should try and do is find the centre ground of British politics. The centre ground doesn't really exist. The centre ground is just the middle point on the political spectrum. What we should care about is the common ground of British politics. The common ground is where millions of our fellow citizens are. And I would argue that millions of people care about controlling and reducing immigration, keeping our safe streets, ensuring that we are a more united country and we get integration right. That is what I'm focused on. Our party is at its best when we represent the common ground of politics.
Sorry, and the reason I was giggling slightly there was that that is literally one of the founding statements of the CPS in speeches by Keith Joseph and Margaret Thatcher.
Good afternoon, Robert. Aubrey Allegretti from The Times. You talked a little bit about maternity pay and the discussion we're having about it today, and you said that it is among the lowest in the OECD. Presumably then that means you would like it to rise. Do you know how much by or over what period? And also, I was sort of taken by the biggest cheer in the room being for the criticism you levied at sort of favoured sons and daughters being parachuted into seats. Obviously, these people are now MPs and in Parliament. I just wondered if you became leader, you would stop them being in your shadow cabinet, for example.
Well, you're tempting me with a naughty question there. Look, I don't blame the individuals. I blame the system. I mean, the system was wrong, wasn't it? I don't want to be in a party where the system is rigged. We've got to ensure that it is an open and transparent system to become a member of Parliament. And we should be doing that, in all respects. There's a big task now, frankly, for the Conservative Party. I mean, there's a lot of big tasks for the Conservative Party, but one is we've got to go and find, in the next year or so, a couple of hundred people to stand in our winnable seats. And so if I'm the leader of this party, I want to set out to find people of real substance, people who will make a real contribution to our party and to public life, people who have had careers in business, in the law, in medicine, in teaching, in you name it, who've got something to offer. And I don't want them to feel that they're going to get shafted at the end of the day and they're not going to get the seat that they wanted or even the opportunity to put their name forward to it. So my view is abolish the candidates list, of course weed out the bad apples, but throw it back open to the membership and say, you're in the driving seat, you choose who should be our parliamentary candidates. And I believe in the wisdom of crowds. I rather suspect we'll end up with a very high calibre set of members of Parliament.
Would you move back to open primaries?
Well, I think it should be the membership. The difference with open primaries was that disempowered the membership. This is about giving the membership the power to choose.
The maternity pay point, you would like to see it rise, would you?
I would leave it where it is, but I don't think we should go and reduce it if that was the point that was being made.
And question.
Hello. This may be a difficult thought for an aspiring Tory leader to mull, but do you think there are any lessons that can be drawn from Keir Starmer's leadership of the opposition, taking the Labour Party from a historic defeat to a very sizable victory, that you could draw on as also a leader of the opposition?
Well, look, I think firstly, in a sense, it gives us all hope, because there were those sort of doomsters who said there's no way we could take this very, very difficult defeat and turn it into a victory in 4 or 5 years. I don't believe that's true. We know that although this was a comprehensive defeat, actually it's a shallow victory for Keir Starmer. And there's every reason to believe that we can turn this around and win the next election. I think that Keir Starmer got the Labour Party's own house in order to a degree. And that's the first task for whoever leads this party. We've got to get the operation of the party right. I think you've got to take this in stages and view each one in turn. And the first, which is exactly what Keir Starmer did. The first step is to make sure we get the operation of the party into fighting shape. The second one is to bring home the lion's share of those voters we've lost to reform. I believe we can do that. I believe the only way we do it, well, first it helps to have a leader who has credibility and authenticity on those issues, like immigration, but it's by having crystal clear positions. Not saying, oh, we'll debate this, over the next 5 years. That's a recipe for disunity and for further erosion of public trust. But having now a clear plan on those crucial issues. And then, of course, we have to move on to win back all the voters that we lost on our left. And rather like Boris said, to coin a phrase, get Brexit done, the point of getting migration done is that enables us to move on to talk about the health service, education, the environment, all the other things that drive us in politics, and which will no doubt help us in bringing out the people we've lost to the left. So let's take this one step at a time.
If we can find someone at the back who's not wearing a media pass, because this is about the membership and the wisdom of the crowds.
Hi, Robert. Richard Patient here. I'm really pleased that you're doing so well. Very pleased that you're talking about housing and supply side. But actually, I really want to say, if you didn't win, I'd like Kemi to win. If you didn't win, because actually I'd like you to win, really, to be honest with the truth. But if you don't, what can you say in that spirit? What can you say about Kemi that's positive, or about
or any of the other
Rachel,
candidates?
about policy?
Yeah.
Well, look, I think the party is lucky. There's a really strong field of candidates. I have, Kemi's a personal friend of mine. I have respect and admiration for her. And if I was lucky enough to lead the party, of course I would want her to play an important role in its future. I think all four of us share that. The Conservative Party needs to come together. I've said repeatedly that we've got to get our best players onto this pitch. When people have asked me, what is the future of Boris? Or, these great people who lost their seats, like Penny Mordaunt, or fantastic former mayors, like Andy Street, here in the West Midlands. Let's get the whole team together and bring forward the most talented people we can. I believe in meritocracy, and I want you to look at the shadow cabinet, if I'm lucky enough to lead this party, and for it to demonstrably be the best people in our party. That's what we need. Otherwise, we would be letting you down as a member of the party, and we'd be letting the country down.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so Emma, if you could pick 2 or 3 people to ask some quick questions, and then Rob, like a politician, can just choose which ones he answers.
I never do that.
Hi, Robert. I think you come across really well, so thank you very much for today. I look forward to reading the report as well. A little while ago, we all know what The Guardian can be like, but there was an article about instructions you gave at an asylum centre in Kent about covering up murals, which felt a little bit uncomfortable to me. So I would like to hear from you, was it true? And if so, do you really hold those beliefs, or did you get carried away with the moment? And why would you do that for lone children that had just come across?
Yeah, no, completely understand the point you're making. Look, the vast majority of the individuals who passed through the centre that you're referring to were 16, 17-year-olds, or in fact, and this is a difficult but true thing to say, young adults who are posing as children. And I have a particular concern about that, because that is an enormous risk to families, to our whole system, the foster carers, all the loving and kind people who go on to look after particularly unaccompanied children. And so we did think it was important that we change the way in which those centres operate so that there is a degree of law enforcement. However, it's obviously important for us. It's the overwhelming priority is to treat people, particularly children, with care and compassion. And when I was Immigration Minister, I did a lot of work in that regard. When I arrived in the department, in fact, we had a whole series of hotels that were housing unaccompanied children in conditions that were probably unlikely to meet the legal regulatory standard. And I went to visit them, was deeply concerned about them. I worked extremely hard to ensure that we closed those hotels and got those young people immediately or as swiftly as possible into the loving care of foster carers and suitable accommodation. You know, that's the way that I choose to conduct myself. One of my concerns about illegal migration generally is a moral one. I think it is absolutely abhorrent that you have people, particularly children, being put into the hands of people smugglers and human traffickers. And that is why we've got to stop this once and for all. So the most compassionate thing we can do as a country is to break this business model and end this situation forever. The only way we will do that is by the approach that I have set out, which is to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, ensure that if people come here, they're swiftly removed. No one will come here once that happens. We'll save lives. Children, young adults will not be put in that situation ever again.
The lady at the front's been very patient. And I'm really sorry, we're probably not going to have time for everyone.
Hi, it's Jennifer Scott from Sky News. I just wanted to push you a little bit further.
Another journalist.
Sorry, but it is going back to one of your questions that you didn't quite answer about the winter fuel allowance. So obviously, what you were saying about people who
I thought you were going to ask me about Kay Burley's comment.
No. I'll leave that to you and Kay. But about obviously what you were saying about the £13,000 and those people on the cusp, people will understand in this room. But when we're talking about the comparison is always made with, you know, should Alan Sugar be getting paid that? Should Mick Jagger be getting paid that? What would you do about that level? And if you were lucky enough, like you said, to lead the party and get back into power, would you introduce that again for as a universal benefit?
I've said that I would do. Of course, you have to be cautious when you produce universal benefits. Sometimes it's actually very challenging to successfully means test benefits. Sometimes it's even more expensive to means test them than then provide them universally. That's something that the Treasury and departments have worked through on a number of different universal benefits, and it's often surprisingly difficult to means test them. I think if Alan Sugar wants to donate his winter fuel payment to charity, he's free to do that. I don't want to see a poor pensioner on £13,000 a year losing £600 this autumn and winter. I think that's wrong. And if that is being done to pay unions billions of pounds, or Ed Miliband £8 billion for his energy company, or £11 billion for climate aid, that is a bad political choice. And I think it's shameful that Keir Starmer has chosen to make it.
Hello, thank you. I'm a veteran and a member of the Royal Naval Reserve as well, and I work around in Portsmouth and for shipbuilding. I don't know if you've been down there, but the armed forces, I've not heard you speak anything about them and how decimated they are and the way the world is at the moment. What would you plan? I think 2.5% wouldn't cut it. I think we really need some, big spending, especially, as I personally believe, on the Royal Navy, and the British Army is the smallest. Apparently you can get the whole of the British Army in Wembley Stadium at the moment, which is a bit daft. So your thoughts on the changing world and how we protect ourselves?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for your service, and I share your concern at the state of our armed forces. I want to see it invested in. I think we should be doing that more intelligently than we have in the recent past, because procurement has been poor, and so there are lessons to be learnt from how we spend money. But you're right to say we need to invest more. I've said that we should be investing 3% of GDP in defence. And because I'm a fiscal conservative, we are at the CPS, after all, the easiest thing in the world is just to commit to spending more money on our armed forces without saying how you would find that money. And so for a long time now, I've advocated that we take money from our international aid budget and we spend it on our armed forces. I think in a world of difficult choices, the best way in which the UK can protect the interests of our own people and play its role in the world is having a properly equipped, properly funded armed forces. And I would much rather do that than give money on dubious international development projects to parts of the world, some of which are richer than parts of our own country. So that's what I would do. Doing that could bring us to 2.5% of GDP tomorrow. And then, of course, we'd need to find ways of going higher still than that. And if I was choosing to prioritise between our armed forces, I would certainly look to the Royal Navy, because I'm very worried about the state of the Royal Navy. I'm very worried about our nuclear deterrent and the condition that that's in, the need for urgent attention and investment to that. So those are things that I would ultimately prioritise.
I'm getting a signal from my colleague that we are, I'm afraid, out of time. Thank you all very much for coming. There will be events here, not as good as this one, but almost as good, throughout the conference. Please feel free to take away the copies of Robert's book, and feel free to come back for a topic dear to your heart in half an hour's time. Build or block, the future of conservative housing policy. But in the meantime, please join me in thanking Robert Jenrick.
Very good. Thank you all very much. Thank you.